All right, moving on to the next segment of today's show. Today in New York, it's a special day, and yesterday in New York was a special day because it was the first time in a while that we've saw on our TV the Mets, the Yankees, at the ballpark, at Yankee Stadium, at Citi Field, practicing and training, and it is, as of now, looking like we're going to have a baseball season. And I know after everything that happened with the owners and the players, it's going to, a lot of people are going to have some bad blood with everything that went down. But for me, I see my team on the field, I'm watching it. And I'm excited for it. No matter who, when, what, where, I want my Mets to win. And I decided I wanted to talk some baseball on today's show. And I haven't actually spoke this, actual baseball on the show in a while. When I was all ready to record the MLB preview podcast, basically the week when the coronavirus hit, and I haven't really been talking much baseball since then. But the other day, when it was announced that the MLB does plan on coming back in late July, I was like, you know what? I might as well dig in and do some research. And I've looked at all 30 teams. I've kind of gotten back into that baseball mode. I'm going to have to do that with the NBA eventually as well. But it's going to be a 60-game season. I'm going to consider it legitimate because every team is starting from the same stomping grounds. And I decided on today's segment, I want to talk what teams I think could be pretty good and what teams I think could benefit from a 60-game season, and some are, teams that you would expect, some are teams you wouldn't expect, and I want to talk some baseball, so let's do it. The first team I really like, and I know most people right now do expect this team to make the playoffs, but the more and more I look at this team, I'm considering them to be a possible World Series contender, and that's the Tampa Bay Rays. Last year, the Tampa Bay Rays, for the second year in a row, won over 90 games. And I remember going into the playoffs, I was like, all right, on paper, this lineup isn't that good. They have a couple good young pitchers, but how good are they really? And I remember they played the Oakland A's in the wild card game, and their first batter was Yandy Diaz. And he hit a rocket over the right field fence at the Oakland Coliseum. And I was like, all right, this team could rake. Meadows, Brandon Lau, underrated player. They bring in Hunter Renfroe and Manuel Margot from the Padres. Kevin Kiermaier, Willy Adames is a guy I think could have a breakout season. Ji-Man Choi. So the Rays are a pretty good offensive team. They're good, nothing great, but they're good. But here's the thing. They don't need to be a great offensive team with their pitching. They're 1-2-3 of Charlie Morton, Blake Snell, and my guy Tyler Glasnow, who I think could be a real contender to win the AL Cy Young this year. I love that top three, man. That is a sick top three. Their bullpen is good. Kevin Cash, their manager, really knows how to manage it as well. I know the Yankees are in the AL East, and they are probably 1-30. There are 30-man rosters this year. 1-30 are the Yankees probably the most talented team in all of baseball. Absolutely. But at the same time, what I'll also say is this. The Rays could really compete with them. Every Yankee fan listening to this podcast knows that every time the Yankees play the Rays, it's a pain in the neck. The Rays rarely, lie down for the Yankees. And it could be no matter what players are on the Rays, no matter what year it is, the Rays give the Yankees trouble a lot. And I think the Rays are a team that I really like. And they're my first team I'm telling you guys to watch this season. Moving on to a couple other American League teams I want to watch. A lot of people have said that the 60-game season could help younger teams because there won't be a lot of pressure, they won't be playing in front of fans, and it's a 60-game season. Anything could happen. And I don't know if I agree with that exact take, but I will say this. I do think that playing a 60-game season, it's going to give teams with some young talent an opportunity to play those guys because they don't really have anything to lose. A team like the Chicago White Sox, who is my second team to watch, is a team I'm really excited for because they don't really have anything to lose. All they have is just a bunch of young talent. we'll start off. Yohan Moncada, they got him in the trade for Chris Sale along with Michael Kopech. We'll get to him in a little bit. I love him, man. He was one of the more underrated players in baseball. He had a really nice season last year. They also have Eloy Jimenez, one of the top prospects in baseball. They got him in the trade from the Cubs for Jose Quintana. And then their center fielder is a kid, Luis Robert, who is also considered to be one of the best prospects in baseball. And he already got paid, so the pressure is going to be on him a little bit, but I think he's ready to handle it. They also did some nice work on the free agent market by bringing in Yasmani Grandal, one of the best offensive catchers in all of baseball, and Edwin Encarnacion from the Yankees. I know all the Yankee fans listening to this show, Edwin was awful in the playoffs last year. I get it, but you need a veteran bat on this team in this lineup, and I think eventually, if Encarnacion just continues not to hit, watch out for Zach Collins, the catcher and first baseman, former first-round draft pick from Miami. Right now, he's projected to start the season on the bench. I think he's a guy to watch that could possibly take Encarnacion's job as the DH or play Collins at first and have Abreu DH, like whatever you want to do. I think that could ultimately end up being the move for the Chicago White Sox. They also have Tim Anderson, one of the more underrated players in baseball. He hits for a very high average. Jose Abreu, as I mentioned. I think this White Sox lineup 1 through 9 is loaded. They also brought in Nomar Mazara from the Texas Rangers. Really good move. And you go to their pitching. Lucas Giolito was one of the 5 or 10 best pitchers in all of baseball last year. He's a former top prospect with the Nationals. He was once considered to be the best prospect in all of baseball. I think he's really good, man. I think I would throw him in that category with a Tyler Glasnow as one of the younger pitchers in baseball to watch that could possibly break out. They bring in Dallas Keuchel. He's obviously not what he used to be, but he could still play. Ronaldo Lopez, good young pitcher. They also bring in Gio Gonzalez for some veteran help. So I think the Chicago White Sox playing in an American League Central that could be pretty tough to win, or against teams that they don't really want to win. The Detroit Tigers, the Chicago White Sox, and the Indians and the Twins should go 8-2 against the Tigers. They're not very good. And in a 60-game season where every game, especially divisional games, mean the most, you have to take advantage. So if the White Sox could do that, I think they'd have a pretty good chance to do something decent this season. Let's go to the National League and a team that stands out to me. Let's see. All right. I want to talk about the Chicago Cubs. I'm lower on the Chicago Cubs than most. I spoke about the Rays. I spoke about the White Sox, and I said I'm high on both of those teams. I think both those teams are going to be really good. I am not very high on the Chicago Cubs. And number one, if you want to ask why, just look at their pitching staff, man. I don't think John Lester nor Hugh Darvish is really that good anymore. Jose Quintana got hurt. Apparently he was washing the dishes. I don't know what that was about, but hope he feels better ASAP. And Kyle Hendricks is good, former Cy Young Award winner, but he's just kind of there. I don't really, if I'm facing him, especially when my team is a good offensive team, I'm not really afraid of him. If the Cubs are going to be good this season, they're going to need that top 5 in their lineup, Bryant, Rizzo, Baez, Schwarber, and Contreras, to hit. It really comes down to that. And it's interesting because when you look at Kyle Schwarber, I think the Cubs, one thing they do have going for them is that with the DH in the National League, Kyle Schwarber is going to have that basically as his everyday position. I remember when he first came up and the Yankees were, targeting, getting rid of Aroldis Chapman, and the Cubs were targeting him. The Yankees said, we want Kyle Schwarber, and the Cubs were like, nah, we'll give you Gleyber Torres instead. And I think that side of the trade has really worked out for the Yankees so far, but Schwarber's had his injury concerns. He's been healthy over the last 2 seasons. I think being the everyday DH will help him, but if those top 5 guys don't hit, like I'm telling you, the Cubs are in big trouble. Joe Maddon is not their manager anymore. They bring in David Ross. It's going to be interesting to see, David Ross, as great as a baseball mind as he is, he was the backup catcher on that Chicago Cub team that won the World Series, and he played a big role on that team, and it's going to be interesting to see, if him and Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo, if they'll have that same, bond that they had, or will it be a little different? Will it be a little awkward? We'll see. But I'm going to tell you this. I don't love the Cubs lineup. I don't love the Cubs bullpen. I don't love the Cubs starting pitching. So even though they have a bunch of talent, I'm not very high on the Chicago Cubs, especially in one of the harder divisions in baseball, the National League Central. We'll end it on this note. I'll give you another team I really like for this upcoming season, and that's the San Diego Padres. And I think they're kind of similar to the Chicago White Sox. But here's the other thing with this team, man. They brought in some talent, and they have veteran talent. And that's one thing that I really like about the Chicago White Sox roster, right? Is that it's a good mix between good veterans and good young talent. And I think when you look at what teams in baseball are built to win, and which teams in baseball are built to go the furthest, not only this season, but any season. I think, no matter how many games you play, if your lineup is good enough, they'll grind out at bats, and your team will, hopefully end up winning. But when you look at this Padres team, look at the blend of talent they have. You look at their young guys. Fernando Tatis Jr., he was hurt for a big portion of last year, but there's no doubt about it. He's one of the 5 best, young players in baseball. I think when you're ranking players like under 23 or lower, Tatis has to be at the top of your list. They also have, in terms of their offensive guys, they don't really have... Tatis is really their only great young hitter that's at the major league level right now. But they have some guys that are going to come up soon. C.J. Abrams is a really good young shortstop. Luis Campusano is a good young shortstop. Those guys are both 20... Campusano is 21. Abrams is 19. But I'm excited about the Padres pitching because they could have the best pitching prospect in the game, and that's Mackenzie Gore. And right now, it's unlikely that he's going to start the season on the Major League roster, but most people do think there's a solid chance that he could come up, especially when you look at the Padres. Yeah, right now, their weakness is their starting pitching. I believe in Chris Paddock. I know he was a little up and down last year, and he did have Tommy John a couple years ago, but he pitched all of last season. I believe in him, man. I think his stuff is nasty. I think he's really good. I'm telling you, I love his attitude. I love his game. I'm a big Chris Paddock guy. They bring in some veterans like Garrett Richards and Zach Davies. I think those moves are solid. I like Zach Davies. I think he kind of got the short end of the stick in Milwaukee after one bad season. I think he was one of their more consistent starting pitchers, like from 2015 to 2018. Garrett Richards was with the Angels for a long time and never really worked out there. He showed potential but always got hurt. Joey Lucchesi is a lefty that is very hard to hit. He has a funky lineup, funky windup, and Mackenzie Gore and Chris Paddock at the top. I think that could be really good. And when you look at this Padres lineup, there are the guys I didn't mention. Machado, Hosmer, Will Myers. They bring in Jurickson Profar. They also bring in Tommy Pham from the Tampa Bay Rays. And I think that was an even trade, but I think the Padres won it because Tommy Pham for Hunter Renfroe and Manuel Margot, I think the Padres just got the best player in the deal. And the Padres, the other thing about this team is they have guys on their bench that could play. Like Josh Naylor is one of their guys off the bench. He was a former top prospect with the Marlins. Like, he's pretty good, and he produced last year. Same with Greg Garcia. He's been a guy that's been around, good veteran infielder. Austin Hedges is a catcher that could hit. Franchi Cordero's an outfielder. Right now, he's projected to start, who could be pretty good. They have Will Myers back. They also bring in Trent Grisham from the Milwaukee Brewers, who will he'll be very eager to prove himself after that error he made for the Brewers in that wild card game against the Nationals last year. So I'm higher on the Padres, and right now those are my 4 teams I want you guys to keep an eye out on: the Rays and the White Sox, and in the American League, and the Cubs and the Padres in the National League. As we get closer and closer to baseball, we'll be talking more and more baseball on this show. But the week before the season starts, my 2 guys, Brian Krinick and Brian Acker, both of these guys have been on the show before. They were both on the NBA draft podcast. And then also Krinick and I, when quarantine first started, we recorded just a random podcast talking about the American League East. That's what we were doing during those times. So those 2 guys are going to come on this show, 2 great baseball minds, and we're going to talk about all 30 teams, give you guys predictions, give you guys players we like, teams we like, players we don't like, players we do like. It's going to be a really fun show. I'll let you guys know when that's out. But those were my 4 teams to watch.